Just so you know, this is being recorded, so we can send this round to you after the talk, and also the slides. And on the slides, we have some clickable links, so you'll get those through too. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining me tonight. This is, I think, our third or fourth talk we've done with you. So for those who aren't familiar with me, my name's Laura, and I am I'm head of character education at Role Models. And Fran is on my team, and together we write content for our wellbeing curriculum, and we work with our facilitators and our schools. And Role Models. So what do we do? Just to give you a brief background for those who aren't familiar with us, we support children in three main areas. We build their confidence, we support them in managing their emotions, and in developing friendships. And we do this different ways. We do this predominantly in what we call our sort of after school club. It's online, it's interactive, it's small groups, and it's great fun for the kids. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Why do we teach character? Some people call character skills soft skills. I don't know if that does it justice, but we do it for three main reasons. The first reason is to improve mental health and well-being. We know that if we give children tools from an early age to understand their emotions, understand others' emotions, how to communicate their feelings, how to respond to their feelings, we are giving them tools to go some way to prevent them developing poor mental health. Then we know that what we teach is supports academic attainment. If you think about children who are confident, who aren't scared of taking risks, who know how to ask questions, who know how to collaborate, they are all likely to thrive academically without their self-doubt or insecurities or fears holding them back. And the last one is that we know it enhances future job prospects. I'm not sure if that's something that's on your radar now. I don't know how old your children are, but presumably their future career isn't at the forefront of what you're thinking. But we do know from the World Health Forum, the World Economic Forum, that the skills most needed in the workplace are skills such as cognitive flexibility, emotional intelligence, empathy, leadership skills, which is why we are so passionate about teaching children. We feel we're really upskilling them for their futures. Here you go, here's the list. Critical thinking, cognitive flexibility, emotional intelligence, we know that these are really key skills. So at Role Models, we teach these skills under four main pillars: resilience, leadership, creative problem solving, and collaboration. And we're here tonight to talk about resilience. So by the end of the webinar, I hope that we have an agreed understanding of what we mean by the term resilience. It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. We're going to cover three main ways to develop it. So three things that you can do at home to support the development of resilience. And we're going to discuss tools and strategies to do so. And then at the end, I've got some further reading for you. And when these slides get sent round, they're clickable links to everything. So what is resilience? You're more than welcome to put this in the chat if you would like to, or you can just sit back and enjoy. Resilience, what is it? Well, how would we define it? We define it as getting comfortable with discomfort. A reality of life is that in order to experience all of the highs, everything positive, the excitement, friendship, happiness, all of the positive things, comes an experience of the negative things, that perhaps feeling sad, lonely, anxious, left out, frustrated, angry. It's all part of the human experience. So when we teach resilience, we're not teaching children to not feel, but we're teaching them to manage and tolerate those feelings. The way we do that is by having coping strategies and perspective, to have that distress tolerance, to be able to cope with those feelings. Self-efficacy is something we speak a lot about at Role Models. And I suppose it's that internal belief that we can do things, that internal faith in ourselves that we need to fall back on when things get tough. I know this is tough, I know this is unpleasant, I know this isn't enjoyable, but I also deep down have a belief that I can tolerate this, I can cope with this. What it is not. Hopefully you'll be relieved to find that resilience isn't a fixed trait. Yes, there are people who are naturally more resilient than others, but there are also people who are naturally great mathematicians. It doesn't mean we can't teach them maths and upskill them. And that's the same with resilience. So if you have a child in mind who perhaps does lack resilience, or you yourself are thinking that you can struggle with these things, this is something we can develop, which I think is really exciting. And also resilience, as I mentioned, is not pushing away difficult emotions. It's experiencing them and managing them. So I invite you to think of this now. Again, you're welcome to put it in the chat, but you don't have to. But when, where, and how do you notice a lack of resilience impacting your child or family? With the families that we work with, quite often lack of resilience can come from children stepping outside their comfort zone. So maybe that could be trying new clubs, going to new places, trying new sports activities, just things they're unfamiliar with. It could be that your child appears to have a lot of resilience, but then as soon as something goes wrong, they totally crumble. And again, for each of you here tonight, it will be something different that's personal to your child or your family. I'm not going to press this video, but it is in the slides when they get sent round. It's a video on growth mindset, which is something that we talk a lot about at Role Models. So I do invite you to watch it. But growth mindset is a belief that sort of anything is possible. And a fixed mindset is a belief that our skills and our talents are fixed at birth. And we'll find ourselves speaking with quite a fixed mindset quite often. I will often say to my children, oh, I'm just not a good runner. I'm not a good runner. It's just not one of my skills. I'm good at other things. However, if I really wanted to be good at running, I could do something about it. I could do the Couch to 5K. I could look up strategies on how to help me. I could actually try going for a run more often than once a year. I could make sure I'm getting good sleep, nutrition. If I wanted to, I could. So in saying I'm not a good runner suggests that it's out of my control and it's not very empowering. So I would watch how you speak about yourself in front of your children and really help cultivate that growth mindset, the fact that you can't do it yet. And if it's something you want to do, there's something you can do about it. And we're going to go on to some strategies soon. So here's the good bit. So I remember as a teacher in my early career, I used to sit in these talks and wait for the strategy and wait till the very end. But what we've done now is I've put them right the way through. So hopefully you can get some useful tips to take away now. Here are some phrases and responses that you can say to your children in the moment. We often get parents saying, they understand the theory, but what do they do in that moment where their child is really struggling? So here are some ideas. If your child says it's too hard, you can tell them that their brain is getting stronger and they're helping it grow. Now, with these phrases, I don't expect your child to say, oh, well, in that case, it's not too hard, my brain's growing. This is all helping them understand what's happening. So just like if you're in the gym and you're building muscle, your muscles get built when you really push yourself, when you really lift those hard weights. And when we learn new things, we create new neural pathways, and that enables your brain to grow, and that's hard. So there's not something wrong, nothing bad is happening when it's hard, but your brain is growing, and that does feel hard. And that just helps reframe what is going on. Again, not all of these will work for all of your children, but I do invite you to try them and be consistent with them. The next, I'm scared. What's really important is to validate feelings. If we think about what we need when we're having feelings, big feelings, if we're scared, anxious, frustrated, and we tell someone that's how we feel, would it help to have someone say, don't be silly, no, you're not? It probably wouldn't. It would probably feel quite frustrated, perhaps lonely because you're not being understood. So what we do at Role Models is we invite the phrase, doing new things can feel scary. Do you remember when? And in that point, in that moment, we remind them of a time where they've overcome something. Now, the only way we can do that is if we let our children experience hard times. We let them feel sad if something sad happens. We let them feel angry if something frustrates them. And then those feelings pass, because they do pass. And you look back and you show your child, do you remember that time where you were really scared to go to chess? And now you love chess and you're so good at it. You know, whatever the example is for your child, try and build their self-efficacy by reminding them of a time where they have done something. Then there's this one, I quit. That might happen when they're doing their homework, perhaps they're learning to ride a bike. It's just all a bit too much and they quit. And so you saying, show me the hard bit, gets them to really focus on what the problem is. Not everything is hard. It's not possible. Getting on the bike isn't hard. You know, the first question of the maths paper, the opening your maths book, the putting the data at the top. What is the tricky bit? And then you can step in and support them with that. But teaching them to acknowledge what it is they're struggling with is the first step to getting them involved with the solution. The next one is, I'm stupid for finding this difficult. With this one, it's really important that our responses are authentic. And it's painful to hear your child say they're stupid. It's really upsetting. I understand that. And as parents, we're triggered by our children's emotions. But again, if your child is really struggling with spelling and they come back with a 2 out of 10 on their spelling test and say, I'm so stupid, it's not authentic to say, you're a great speller, you're fantastic, because it's just clearly something they're struggling with. So we use this word yet, and it's something we use throughout our role model sessions. You just haven't mastered it yet. What might help? And that just means that when you give your child praise, they know that you're really praising them for what they're good at. And the fact that they're not good spellers is okay. You're not saying, yes, you are, yes, you are. You're confirming that it's actually okay if they can't spell these words yet. But again, with that growth mindset, so what are we going to do about it? What can we focus on? What can we put in place that's going to affect change? The next one, I don't need feedback. This isn't always said as politely as this. It depends on the mood that your child is in. But it is that difficulty when your child's perhaps doing their homework and they're really proud and they bring it over to you and you just think, oh, I don't think this is their best efforts. I think they could do better. And a mantra that we have at Role Models is that feedback can help you get better, and getting better is more important than being good. And that's really key. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for what can you do to improve. And a really good thing to be able to do is to model that mindset. So that might sound like you've baked a cake and you ask for feedback. And then you share with your children, you know, I think I'm really getting better at the base. And now I'm going to work at the icing and on the icing. And the key thing is and. So well done. You've really mastered your full stops. And now I want you to look at your speech punctuation. The word and suggests that it's just normal to have a next step. We have next steps, you have next steps. Getting better is more important than being good. The word but suggests that there's a problem. And what we need is we need children to know that they're just working on themselves. They're continuously working on themselves and improving. And that's really exciting. It's not, I'm giving you feedback because this is really bad. You've tried, but it's not good enough. It's you've tried and now let's work on this. And then a meltdown of any form, which I don't think there are any parents amongst who can say that they haven't experienced a nice meltdown from their children. And if yours are like mine, they tend to happen in public with as many people viewing as possible. But what we say, and sometimes this isn't done in the moment you've just got to ride the storm of the meltdown, but afterwards we say, I think two things are true, and this is taken from Dr. Becky Goodinside. And the idea here is that the first thing you do is you validate. So your child's come home, perhaps from school, and they've seen some friends go on a play date that they weren't invited to. and they're really, really upset. They're in a lot of pain. It's incredibly hurtful for them to see. And our instinct as parents is to avoid that. So that might be saying, you know what, it doesn't matter, it's fine, we're going to do something even more fun after school. Or you're not upset, it doesn't matter, it's fine. So that's our way of trying to stop our children being in pain. But what that does is it teaches them that in some way we can't tolerate their pain. It's normal to not be invited on every play date, but it can also be upsetting. So we use the phrase, I think two things are true here. And the first thing is, I think you're really sad that you're not invited to this play date. I can see that. I can see you're really sad. You feel really hurt and disappointed. But the other thing that I know is true is that you have many play dates to look forward to. And next week you're going on a play date with so-and-so, and I know that you're going to have a wonderful time, and that this sadness and this disappointment won't last forever. And that's our way of building children's ability to tolerate those uncomfortable feelings. If we start telling them, you're not upset, you're fine, let's distract you, we'll do something even more fun after school, we're not building their resilience to experience those feelings. We're telling them that there's something incredibly wrong with those feelings. And as parents, we're going to do everything we can to stop our children feeling them. Now, as a parent of two little ones myself, I know this is really hard. And we are wired, we're hardwired to step in and to stop our children feeling these tough feelings. But there are certain times when it's okay to just let them experience them. So this is always the one that is a bit difficult to deliver to parents, because we know already that children are sponges and that they absorb everything we say and we do. That this is really key for us to understand the positive impact we can have on our child's resilience. We know that how we respond and interact with our child influences their emotions and their behaviours. And so our own levels of resilience are being watched and copied. And that's not to say that we can't make mistakes. We can't lose our temper when something's a bit too tricky for us. I don't know, we're making dinner and it's all gone wrong, or we're stressed at work. That's okay. But let's think about what it is that we can do to affect change. Now, I've got a link to a TED talk at the bottom here by Lucy Hone, and I really do invite you to watch it. Lucy Hone was doing a lot of research on resilience and was an expert on resilience, and then very tragically experienced a terrible personal loss. And she had to test everything that she once believed about resilience. And through her experience, she has identified that resilient people have three main traits. So what we're going to do now is we're going to discuss those three traits and what you can do to help your child develop them. So the first one is that they know difficult things are going to happen. And that's really key, because it takes away that victim mentality, that why me. The more we fight against bad things happening, it doesn't affect change, it doesn't stop them happening, but it stops us accepting it and moving on. So knowing that tough things happen is really key to our children. That we're not entitled to perfection. And that's really hard, because as we've said, we're biologically hardwired to want to make everything perfect for our children. So how can we cultivate this at home? We don't hide difficult emotions, and we don't hide things being difficult. And obviously in an age-appropriate way, tell your children if you've had a tough day. Perhaps you were really frustrated because you had a really hard task at work and it was just really difficult and you were really struggling to get it done. Or perhaps you got lost on the way to work, or you took the wrong train and you were late and you felt really flustered. Show children that our days aren't necessarily always perfect. And I think that's really key. As parents, sometimes we feel we have to show children this perfect version. We're fresh faced when they get back from school with a huge smile on our face, regardless of what's happened in the day. And while that's lovely, it's also okay to say, you know, I'm just exhausted. I've worked really hard today. And I know that what I need to do is go for a walk in the fresh air or take a bath. Model self-care, model that you can tolerate those feelings, but they are there. The next one is allow them to experience hard times. And we've touched on that before. Don't necessarily distract them if they're not invited to a play date that they want to be, or if they've got if they're struggling academically, let's not tell them that they're not. Let's validate those feelings. We don't always have to step in and stop these things happening. My husband always reminds me of a time where my eldest was very little and she was in soft play and these boys pushed her over, and I zoomed straight over to them. And it was, you know, that motherly instinct, that parental instinct when we love and we just want to protect. But we have to decide as parents, when are the opportunities for us to just step back and let them navigate it. Then the next is build their capacity and self-belief that they can cope with difficulty. And that's really powerful to tell our children, I know that you can handle this. I know you're really sad. I know you're really hurting at the moment. And I know that you are going to be able to get through this. And I think that's a really powerful message. So what does this look like in practice? We've got this chart here, and it's just for you to use to question your instincts and how you respond to your children, and if there's something more effective you could do. So if your child, your 3-year-old, is struggling to put their shoes on, do we just sweep in and say, look, mummy will do it for you? If you're running out the house and you're late, and when is it ever smooth sailing leaving the house with young children, then yes, obviously it's absolutely fine to do your children's shoes. But if you have time and they're getting frustrated, would it be more helpful to just say, wow, you know, I can see it's really frustrating, but look at you. Look how hard you are working on doing and not putting it on. And don't focus on the outcome, because they will learn to put their shoes on, but focus on the effort. Can they take so much pride in the fact that they haven't given up? Look, it's so frustrating and you're still doing it. With a 6-year-old, maybe they're falling out with their friends, and our instincts might be to mediate, to call the parent, to call the school and ask them to solve it. Is it more helpful to just ask our children what they want us to do? I've tried doing this with my daughter, and I have to admit it's really tough. But when she tells me something that happens at school, my instinct is to tell her, right, what you need to do is say to that friend, or go to the teacher, or make sure you do this. And I've started saying to her, and I am not a perfect parent, I make many a mistake regularly, but I've tried, and I started saying, do you want me just to listen, or do you want me to give some advice? And 9 times out of 10, she just wants me to listen. And so what would that be like? What if our child has had a fallout with a friend and we listen, or we can say to them, what would you like me to do? And if they say, can you call the mother? Then yes, absolutely. I'm not suggesting you don't, but let's involve our children in the solution a bit more. Instead of sweeping in and fixing it, we're not building their self-efficacy to dealing with it, we're fixing it. So let's at least make them part of the process. And again, you know, with an 11-year-old, perhaps they're put in a group at school and they really don't like it. And we know that if we just call the teacher and explain, the teacher can swap it. Are we preparing them for life? Because I'm pretty sure at work, we've all worked with people throughout our careers that perhaps we wouldn't have chosen to work with, but we just have to get on with it. And maybe we learn different strategies and with how to deal with different people. And again, it's building that resilience, is that it's not always fair. Yeah, you're not with your friends and perhaps they're in a group together. And I get that. That's really frustrating. Well, this science project isn't going to last forever. And what do you think you could do to help make this more bearable? So again, this is just some ideas to get you thinking. So the second trait of a resilient person is that they choose where to give their attention. We are hardwired to find the negative in a threat, and some people naturally do it more than others. I often have parents saying, you know, there's one parent who is constantly on high alert, constantly terrible, constantly doctor on speed dial ready to take action, and the other parent just seems to be much more convinced that everything's going to be fine and not a problem. So what can we do if we're naturally that inclined and our children are naturally that inclined? What can we do to support them in learning that they can really choose where they put their attention? So that might be that you have a family motto. You hunt the good stuff. So maybe you've gone on a day trip somewhere, you've gone to the coast, but it's rained and you've been stuck in traffic and it's all just terrible. And yeah, that has happened sometimes, doesn't it? Just everything seems to go wrong. But what if your motto as a family is to hunt the good stuff? Maybe you've had a good time to be in the car and, I don't know, play I Spy for the 1600th time, you know, whatever it is, hunt the good stuff, make it a family tradition to always find that silver lining. I've got a link here to a gratitude journal. You could do some form of this yourself, daily, weekly, but finding time to really focus on the fact that there's something positive that we can be appreciative for. And then the next one is to purposefully analyze what we can and can't control. And this is my suggestion. Whether or not you draw this out or whether or not it just forms part of a discussion, we tend to focus when we worry a lot on what's not in our control. And let's try and change this for our children. So with the example of exams and interviews, when we worry, let's think about what's in our control. So it's in your control whether or not you smile when you walk into an interview, how rested and prepared you are, how much practice you have done, and how smart you look. Those are the things that it serves us to focus on. The things that aren't in our control are what's in the exam paper, what questions you'll be asked, who interviews you, and how well everyone else does. And it's important to acknowledge that those things might make you anxious and be concerning. Again, we're not pushing away difficult feelings, but it's not going to serve us to focus on them. So let's acknowledge them and then really shift our focus. And as a person who has a propensity to focus on things that are out of control, it's not going to be the one-time solution. You show this diagram to your children and they'll, you know, never ruminate on things out of their control. But it's a really important skill to teach our children that they can put a lot of effort in to putting their attention on something positive. And then there are always things in the middle, like being on time, things that are sort of in our control. We can do our best, but then there's an element of, you know, if there's a traffic jam, there's nothing we can do. So for a younger child, how might this look? If you have a child who perhaps gets a bit scared to go on play dates, they get really worried, what's happening is they're focusing on the negative. They're focusing on the fact that they might not like the food, they might get shy, they might miss us. And that's all very valid. That's really normal. And I think for little ones especially, not knowing what they're going to eat or having the potential of a meal that they just don't want is really scary to them. But what are they missing? What are they not thinking about? They're not thinking about the fact that this friend might have lots of toys they've not played with before, or maybe they have a pet that you don't have that they get to see, or maybe the mum is a bit more generous with dessert than you are. You know, they're only focusing on the negative. Let's just broaden the picture. What are they missing? And then there are these three. What's possible versus what's probable? And I think that's really key. Is it possible that the parent will serve you a bowl full of foods that you hate? It's possible. Versus what's probable, most likely, is there'll be something as an option for dinner that you could like. There'll be something there that you won't mind eating. But if it did happen that the parent serves you up a plate of boiled Brussels sprouts and you just can't eat it, would you cope? And then talk through what might happen. Could you say to the parent, I'm really sorry, but I don't like eating this. Is there something else I could have? Or perhaps you could even call in advance and confirm what's for dinner to give them that peace of mind. But if the worst did happen, they would cope, and that builds that self-efficacy. And then for the children who really do seem to spend a disproportionate amount of time focusing on their worries and anxieties, let's just gain a bit of control with that. If you create a worry list or a worry box, Your children can write and contribute to that whenever. And then you pick a time, it could be daily, it could be weekly, where you sit and you go through all those worries. And what that does is it just gives our children the opportunity to choose. I'm going to acknowledge this worry, I'm going to put it aside, and I know that there'll be time for me to address it. It helps it becoming an all-consuming part of their lives. They're going to put it to the side and address it later. And the third trait of a resilient person, they question their thinking. Is this helping me or is this harming me? And what's really important, and I think we learn this as adults the hard way, but we don't have to believe everything we think. If we think we're stupid or we're not as good as other people, we're not as friendly or fashionable or clever or whatever it is that we're feeling insecure about, and we say all these negative things to ourselves, we don't have to believe all these negative things. So how can we cultivate this? We've got some thinking traps. Again, you might show this to your child, you might draw it out with them, or you just might explain it to them. But there's a relationship between our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. And our thoughts create feelings. So if we're sat in a maths lesson telling ourselves that we're stupid, everyone else gets it, they're the only one that doesn't, and actually I'm just not very good at maths, I'm not good at maths, I can't do this, I'm going to feel really disheartened, I'm not going to feel motivated, I'm going to feel really low, and the chances are in my actions I'm not going to put a tremendous amount of effort into doing it because I'm not motivated. And that's just going to feed into my initial thought, which, well, I wasn't very good anyway. And the results, I can see I wasn't good because I haven't done any of the maths. And it feeds into this vicious cycle where our thoughts, we make them happen, we bring them into reality. So let's change our thoughts. What if the thought was, I'm just not good at maths yet, I just don't understand this yet? And then the feeling is slightly more empowered, slightly more hopeful, and the action would be asking for help in class or going home and telling whoever's at home that it was a bit of a struggle. And then the thought is, I'm getting better, I'm making progress, I'm affecting change. And so there's a really powerful connection between our thoughts and our feelings and actions, and we can make a positive impact. Here are some common thinking traps. Now, what I would say is pointing it out to your child isn't going to have an instant effect. But what it does is it builds their emotional intelligence, it builds an understanding of themselves, which I think is huge. I mean, imagine developing that at a young age, an understanding of yourself and how you think. So the first one is fortune telling. I know I'm going to fail. And that might sound like, oh, I know I'm going to be rubbish in the maths test, or I know I'm not going to make the football team, or I know I'm not going to be invited to this party. And saying to your child, you're fortune telling, you don't know, just proves to them, it points out that they're finding this negative where it's not happened yet. Who knows? Mind reading. My friends all think I'm boring. Pointing out that their mind reading is really key because you don't know what your friends are thinking. And we know as adults that quite often the way people act and behave towards us is to do with whatever's going on with them. But when you're younger, you assume that everyone's behavior is some sort of, it's got something to do with you. So your friends think you're boring. Maybe not. Maybe they've just had a really bad day themselves and they're in a bad mood. You're mind reading. You don't know what other people are thinking. And it's also not your business what other people are thinking. Labeling. I'm not sporty. Again, I'm not a good runner. Let's watch how we say these things. And let's empower our children. You're saying you're not sporty, but if you want to be sporty, then what are you going to do about it? If you don't want to be sporty, perhaps that's absolutely fine. But if you're upset that you're not, well, what can we do? We can join a sports team. We can be more active on the weekend. We can get more involved. Let's empower ourselves. Generalizing. I never win anything. I always get picked last. And we can imagine that mood. We've all had those moods where everything just spirals. You're in a bad mood and one thing happens and then everything's all terrible. So just pointing out to our children that that's just how they're feeling at the moment. It's not true that you don't win anything. It's how you feel right now. You feel so fed up. You feel so upset, so disappointed, whatever it is. You're just generalizing. That doesn't always happen. And then catastrophizing. I'm missing the party. Everyone will talk about it. No one will ever want to be my friends. I'll be alone forever. I'm sure we've all had moments where our children are really catastrophizing. And it's really important to let them know that that's what's happening. You're feeling really upset that you can't go to the party. I get that. But that's not going to happen. That people will not talk about this party forever. Your friends will still want to be your friends. Again, acknowledging how they're feeling and then helping them gain a bit of perspective. But pointing out these thinking traps gives our children an insight into the way their minds are working. They don't have to believe what they're thinking. They're just fortune telling. They're just mind reading. So I mentioned our masterclass before. In fact, actually, this is the wrong code here, so please do ignore that. If you would like a masterclass code, please do send me an email to laura@rolemodels.me. But we do have a 14-day free trial of our after-school masterclass. It's either on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Sunday morning, and we have small group sessions where your children learn and develop these skills, and they're always done in a fun way. They're done with facilitators who are much younger and much more fun than I am, and it's just a great opportunity to start building on these skills and normalizing them. If your kids are anything like mine, when I talk about something they sort of switch off, but if somebody else mentions it, it just lands a bit better. And with every session you get a summary of what your child's learned, so you can talk about it with them. When they say what did they do, and when you ask them what they did and they say nothing, you can actually see what they've done. You get an activity that you can do afterwards to supplement the learning, and a tip that you can do with them. As a parent, I would say that these are great. They're fun. Kids really enjoy them. If you do have any questions, please do send an email and ask. I'm going to pop the email here in the chat box. It's info@rolemodels.me. That's great. And then practical ideas. So what can we do at home to further support our children's development of their resilience? So praise the process and not the outcome, and that's really key. In order for children to be okay with making mistakes, okay for finding things difficult, for failing, for getting it wrong, it can't be just the focus on the outcome. The process has to be the bit that's important. So even if your child comes home and they get 10 out of 10 in a spelling test, celebrate that. Absolutely, we can celebrate the outcome, but make a point of really picking something in the process that you can praise. So, wow, not only did you get 10 out of 10, but what I'm really proud of is the fact that you came home and you made an effort to practice your spellings before you went and played in the garden. Making sure that the process, the progress they are making is what we're always celebrating. So it's progress, not perfection. Again, we model that in the things we do in our own, maybe I do go for a run and I do only make it to the end of the road, and coming back and saying, you know what, I'm just proud I got up and I went out for a run, even though I hate it, even though it's not something I'm very confident with. I've made a start and I'm really proud of myself. Neuroplasticity, we've touched on this before, and it's the idea that when we learn new things, we're creating new pathways in our brains. And that sometimes feels quite tough, but that's really exciting. Our brain is a muscle and we're growing it. Reminding you of the show me the hard bit when it all just gets a bit too difficult. And this doesn't have to be academically with work. This can be with a friendship group. This could be with maybe they're building Lego and they're getting really frustrated. Whatever it is, what is getting them to focus on the bit that they find hard? A sense of humor. I really like this one. Sometimes it's not that big a deal, and we can really create this intensity with it because our children are upset, and then we take that upset and that hurt and we add to it, and it's all very heavy. But maybe it's just a little bit funny. It's a little bit funny that you tried ice skating for the first time and you fell on your bottom. Or it's a little bit funny that mummy's been really trying hard to bake a cake, but this one is burnt to crisp. Perhaps it doesn't have to be a huge drama. Then there's this idea that we tell our children, you've got to try new things, you've got to step out your comfort zone, you've got to make mistakes, while we eat in the same restaurants, wear the same clothes, go out with the same people. We're not necessarily modeling this. So what if we try a new thing as a family? We step outside our collective comfort zone, go to new places, try new family sports, a new board game, you know, whatever it is, show your children that you don't fear those things. ABC, accept, breathe, choose. This is for in those moments when we're triggered by our children's lack of resilience, we're triggered by their emotional response. We don't have to have all the answers. We also don't have to get it right all the time. Quite often I have masterclass parents calling me saying, you know I should have done this, but I did this. That's absolutely fine. I do not believe there's a perfect parent out there. I am certainly not one. It's okay to apologize to our children, to say, listen, I overreacted when I got really, really cross and I shouted at you. And I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that that made you feel sad. I was having some big feelings and I'm really going to try and manage that. I think it's okay to show our children accountability for our behavior. That ABC is trying to take a step back for ourselves, accept the situation, take a breath, and then choose how we respond to it. Look for the backstory. So this is when our children come home and say, everyone can do cartwheels, but I can, or everyone's great at this. Looking for the backstory, and you can do it with everyday life, but with the example of, and I'm not very good at football, but Ronaldo is an amazing footballer. Well, he didn't wake up a world-class footballer. If we look into what he's done, he has probably trained more hours and put more effort and made more mistakes and had more setbacks than any of us. But what really got him to that success is the fact that he persisted and he didn't give up. And in our masterclass sessions for the slightly older children, we often focus on a sportsman, a woman, a singer, somebody who has acknowledged that they've had a setback, they've made a mistake, they've persisted, they've pushed through. So let's not just assume that everyone in the class woke up knowing how to cartwheel. But if you want to cartwheel, what are we going to do about it? And then mistakes as a family culture, let's not hide our mistakes from our children. Let's, within sort of appropriate childhood language, let's share those mistakes. I mentioned that we had some books. Quite often it's hard to get children to talk about themselves. It's quite confronting to talk about how they feel. So we do it a lot for our younger content for our children. It's all through stories, it's all through characters. And here are some lovely stories that we've got the clickable links for that you can get. If you've got slightly older children, here are some books. If you would like to upskill as a parent, we've got some recommendations for you. And that is the end of the talk. I've got contact details here, info@role models. Follow us on Instagram. We make some videos with some advice, or pop us an email and sign up for our newsletter. We quite often give you tips and strategies to do with your children. Again, there's a 2-week free trial of the masterclass. So if you're interested to see how your child gets on with it, please do pop us an email. I will stay on if you have any questions, but that concludes our talk. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I'll just leave the chat box open if you have any questions.